You're certainly welcome to just chime in. So, welcome. This is, believe it or not, I think the way we're counting, the eighth program in our Synagogue Vegan Challenge, our Shamayim and Veg Fund grant that is kind of put us on this structured course this year of exploring plant-based options through many lenses, ethical lenses and health lenses and spiritual lenses and mercy for animals, and so many ways to think about this. And we wanted to explore today a little bit more about, because Passover is a time of so much examining, your processes and your kashrut anyway. What that might mean if you were going to try to engage in a plant-based diet. Yes, Rabbi Koppell?
So Kathy put a note up in the chat that she invited a friend who
Okay.
got kicked out. So Kathy, what occurred was we saw a still on the screen with someone's name, and we asked that person to identify themselves.
Okay.
And they did not identify themselves.
Okay.
So, out of a sense of caution, we removed them, and if they would like to come back, I can try to admit them.
Okay. I'll message them.
They were not responsive when we asked.
They probably didn't have their audio on at the point, but
Okay.
yeah, they're welcome back. We just couldn't tell who they were.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. So anyway, here we are, and so we are going to explore. Rabbi Koppell is going to talk a bit about Passover and how the themes of Passover apply to this thought about what you eat and why you eat what you eat and how you make your ethical decisions about that. And then Ingrid is going to talk about our personal decision making around kashrut and ethical kashrut. And then Rabbi Cantor Sharona is going to help us reimagine our Seder plate. And then we wanted to just have a conversation after that about how we're all approaching this. If there were lots and lots of people, we may go into rooms, but I kind of think if it's not any bigger than this, it's nice to hear what everybody has to say together. So we'll take that as it comes. If we need rooms, we'll do some rooms. So Rabbi Koppell's been such an amazing supporter of our of this grant process, and kind of been there for every event, and we so appreciate all that you've done for us this year, Rabbi Koppell. So if you would take it away, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It is lovely to see everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of kashrut and how I see it. So I see kashrut as really providing a sense of a place where we can practice controlling our behavior, and what better place to do that on a daily basis than in eating, something that we do multiple times every day. And my sense is that if we can learn to control what we eat, we develop a sense of self-discipline that can be applied in other areas of our lives that might be so helpful. Kashrut takes something that is a basic animal activity, and it helps us to elevate and bring a sense of holiness to our eating. And that I think is the goal of Jewish spiritual being, is to take our everyday and uplift it. So multiple times a day, we have the opportunity to eat consciously, to stop and think, what are we eating? Where did it come from? Is it an animal? Is it, what's the source of the food? How, if it was an animal, how was it killed? If it was another source, we can ask questions about the labor that was involved in cultivating and producing and providing that food for us. So what we eat is, you are what you eat, right? So there you go. if we look back to the story of creation, the book of Genesis, the original vision of paradise was vegetarian. God gives the first human beings all of the vegetables of the field and the fruit of the trees to eat. And that was what was eaten until after the flood. And God becomes reconciled to human evil. And that is when people begin to eat meat. We have in our tradition a very chutzpahdik concept of the 7 Noahide laws. So we as Jews say that we are subject to 613 commandments. But we extricate from God's instruction to Noah after the flood that there are 7 fundamental principles of law that every single person needs to abide by. And one of this, this may gross you out, but it is not to consume aver min hachai, a limb of a living creature. So if we're going to eat meat, God introduces this idea after Noah that we have to act with some compassion towards the animal. And a fundamental principle is you have to kill the animal before you eat it. And then kashrut comes along to talk about how we go about killing the animal in a way that is going to be the least painful possible. So we develop a concept of tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, which is the pain of living creatures. And there are a lot of halachot, not only about shchita, kosher slaughter, that deal with tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, but for example, the Torah says you cannot plow with an ox and an ass on the same yoke. Because as you can imagine, the ox is going to be frustrated because the ass can't keep up with it. And the donkey is going to be schlepped along by the power of the ox. Another beautiful principle from the Torah is that it is not permissible to muzzle an animal while it is eating. It's just fundamentally not fair to have the animal possibly be hungry and have its face in a food source and deny it the opportunity to eat. So that's generally on Tsa'ar Ba'alei Chaim. And then kashrut further refines our meat eating to say that we can only eat certain animals. There are different criteria for different living things that we might eat. Mammals have to have a split hoof and chew their cud. Fish have to have fins and scales. Birds have to say have to be non-predators. So Kathy said, he says he's getting kicked off without being asked to identify himself. Unfortunately, Kathy, I don't know how to fix this.
Okay. It's just sad because he's the vegan and I'm not, but
Yeah,
tell him everything.
how about this? I'm going to click on, there's a thing here that says enable waiting room.
Okay.
So I enabled a waiting room and let Roy sign on again and see if I can admit Roy from the waiting room. Yeah, I really apologize.
That's okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. We just, we try to be cautious about security. And so, split hoof chew cud, fins and scales, non-predatory birds, and certain means of slaughter to be as quick and painless as possible. So then comes Passover with even more requirements about what we eat and do not eat. And I think it's important that we understand. Oh, and the other principle in the Torah is not to boil a kid in its mother's milk, which is essentially abhorrent idea, and that it becomes the foundation for not combining meat and dairy all together. So, which of course begs the question of chicken, because chicken doesn't have mother's milk, but it's become the practice not to eat birds with meat, with milk either. So I really apologize, Kathy. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's okay.
The best thing is that we have the recording, so they'll be able
Oh, okay. All right.
to see the recording afterwards.
I appreciate your trying.
Yeah. So I think that an important takeaway for us is that Passover can really be seen as the holiday that teaches us to simplify our diet, which is so counterintuitive. We started off and we were talking about how complex people make their observance of Passover with the cooking and the cleaning, and oh, I need kosher for Passover ketchup, and I need kosher for Passover ice cream. And my thought is that the goal of Passover should be to just simplify our diet, not to replicate our regular diet in a kosher for Passover format. Just what's the simplest bread with some bitter herbs that we need, that we can see, how little we need to survive from a food perspective. And I think about my teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, used to tell the story. He went to a conference of psychologists and mystics. So the psychologists were there to study the mystics. And he was chatting with a Native American medicine man who was one of the mystics there with him. And Reb Zalman was talking about Jewish holidays and the festivals. And he was talking about the holiday of Sukkot in the fall and the holiday of Passover in the spring. One is at the fall equinox, the full moon of the autumnal equinox, and Pesach is at the full moon of the vernal equinox. So they're, exactly in their right places in nature. And he said, Brother Rufus said to him, oh, so in the fall, you teach your children the shelter survival, and in the spring, you teach them the food survival. And I just always loved that story because it gave us, such an insight into when somebody from the outside sees your tradition and sees it in a different way. So that always kind of stayed with me. Passover is the food survival exercise, not the exercise in gluttony and consumption. So we're getting into the period that is where we're going to be engaging in what's called bidikat chametz, looking for the chametz. Again, only the Jewish mind could invent this. And weeks and months cleaning your house, getting rid of every bit of chametz you can possibly find. And then you strategically plant chametz around the house and go and gather it up and say, okay, from now on, my house is officially a chametz-free zone. And if there's any more chametz in my house, I disavow any knowledge of it. So I would invite you to think about the idea, what is the essence of what is chametz? It's something that's puffed up. It's something that's expanded. That's why matzah has to be made in with 18 minutes or less, because after 18 minutes, the water comes in contact with the grain of wheat and it starts to expand. So we can look at this metaphorically as an internal time of looking for where are we puffed up within ourselves. So rather than focusing exclusively on the chametz out there in the world, it's a good time to look at the chametz within. What is it within ourselves that we need to get rid of at this time of the year when we're doing all of this external cleanup? Pesach is 6 months after the high holidays. So we think back, we had all of those glorious ideas about who we wanted to be in the year ahead. And now Pesach is a good opportunity to revisit that and to refocus. So I just wanted to conclude with this story that I love so much, getting back to the opening theme of Za'ar Ba'alei Chaim. So the story goes that a revered and saintly figure, the old shochet, died, and the village elders were looking for a replacement. One of the elders interviewed a candidate and watched him perform the shechita ritual. This is a kosher slaughterer. Asked another elder, were you satisfied with the demonstration? Did he do it well? The observer gave a long sigh. What's the matter? Asked the other. Did he not do everything correctly? Was there something wrong with how he recited the prayer, sharpened the knife, moistened the blade? Our old shochet, answered the other, moistened the blade with his tears. So with that, I'll turn it back to Nona and wish everyone a Chag Sameach.
Thank you, Rabbi Koppell. That was lovely. I'm going to have invite Ingrid Gold to talk a little bit about how I think her own path, somewhat of identifying what aspects of kashrut were personal to her, how she developed her own ethical kashrut. I believe that's what we're talking about, right, Ingrid?
I don't think I got the assignment right.
No, you talk about whatever you want to talk about. That is just
okay. I thought we were going to talk about ethical kashrut, but I didn't really think it was supposed to be personal. And interesting, Bonnie and I have quite a bit of overlap. Can you guys still hear me okay? Or see me okay? Okay. I have some notes, so I'm looking at a different screen right now. So as I wanted to speak about ethical kashrut, and as members of a Reformed congregation, some of our members choose to keep traditional kashrut, but we really can choose whether or not we want to keep kosher. But there's a more recent movement known as ethical kashrut. And this movement emphasizes not only the traditional rules, but it also takes into account such issues as animal treatment, which Rabbi Bonnie spoke about, worker conditions, environmental impact, and there are actually many biblical sources that support this. For example, the mistreatment of workers is addressed in Leviticus 19:13 and Deuteronomy 24:14 in the discussion of Betzim Elohim, and that all humans are created in the image of God. And there are lots of environmental values that are found in the agricultural mitzvot of the Torah, including the creation story, where we are told that we have to guard and work the earth. And as Reformed Jews, it's our obligation to, throughout the way that we observe Judaism, right? We look at what the spirit of the law was, not necessarily the letter of the law, right? So when that's applied to dietary law, we can look at how our writings can be applied to our contemporary situation. And as Bonnie spoke about, and she said it way better than I'm sure I will, that Tzar Ba'alim Chaim, which is the mistreatment of animals. And when we look at the industrialized production of food, that's kind of hidden from us, right? Because animals have to be killed before we eat them. And our ethical imperative is that we don't mistreat the animals. And in the Torah, we're made aware again and again of that principle. The animals are given rest on Shabbat, and she spoke about not yoking the different species together. And also there's a requirement for animals to be allowed to graze, which of course they can't in our contemporary feed lots. And when the Torah was written, the idea of the way we have factory farming today couldn't even be imagined, right? Yet there was the foresight to say, animals have to be treated in a certain way, and they have to be able to graze and that kind of thing. And the traditional laws of kashrut do discuss that animals need to be treated and slaughtered in a way to reduce their suffering. So also in the Torah, there is a lot written about respect for the land. And, the humans are created to be stewards to the land and to protect it, lavda and l'shamra. And you've all heard about the Jubilee year, every 7th year where you give the soil a rest. And, with a lot of agriculture today, they use the land for the same crop over and over. And so they deplete all of the nutrients from the soil. And in the Torah, it specifically, tells us we have to rest the land and we can't continue to farm it over and over. And so some of that environmental stewardship is in our tradition. Part of our tradition that, especially as Reform Jews, that we observe is the idea of tikkun olam, right? Repairing the earth. And having a sustainable food system is part of that. And so if we can purchase organic products, patronize local farms or farmers market, and support sustainable food sources, that moves us towards that. Another tenet of Reform Judaism is pursuing justice. And food is one way to do that. Right now, we talk a lot about food justice. And there are huge social costs of industrialized meat production and of agriculture. There are unfair labor practices, unsafe working conditions, and violations of human rights. And unfortunately, much of this is linked to the animal food industry, right? Whether it be meat, chicken, or dairy. And in our previous programs, Nona has talked about some books that are written by Jonathan Safran Foer, one called Eating Animals and one called We Are the Weather, which are very good sources to learn more about this if you're inclined. There's also a Netflix film that was made, or a film that's available on Netflix, based on his book, Eating Animals. It's by the same title, Eating Animals, with Natalie Portman, that I encourage you all to watch. So by promoting social justice and food justice, we can support ethical trading, fair trade practices, and support organizations and products that do that. Another Jewish tenet is protecting our health, Shemirat Haguf. And tradition urges us to treat our bodies with care as we're created in the image of God. Maimonides said we must strive to maintain a healthy body so we can serve God. And so today, that may mean that we stay away from the animal foods, I think, and as you read more and educate yourself more, I think you'll find that too, that we actually can support our bodies better and avoid lots of disease by going to that plant-based diet. In Judaism, we're taught to choose life. And so we can apply that by eating foods that are healthy and fresh and nutritious and free of harmful ingredients. So that's what I got. I didn't think I was supposed to go personal so much, but some of you have already heard my story. So that's what I got. So I will turn it back over to Nona or to Sharona. I think Sharona's next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ingrid. I really appreciate all your insights. And to Rabbi Koppell for starting us on that vision of how we can look at Pesach differently. I had actually a lot of fun putting this part together because I have been for so many years a stickler for has to be this way and this way and this way and this way and trying to keep it. And I remember cleaning up for Pesach with my mom and we, change the dishes and we do this and we do that. It was really important because it wasn't, yes, it was the intent behind it, but it was also the relationship building to do those things together. Well, when you do it by yourself in the household, it's like Chicken Little. Doesn't anybody want to help? No, it's okay. But they like it at the end, right? They all want to participate. So it's been, this year for us is going to be completely different. We have no kids or grandkids with us. We have all elders. We are going to have, we've got five elders ages from like 89 to 95 that are going to be with us. It's wonderful and a little challenging because we need to honor them in terms of what they can do and their capacity. And you'll understand when I say, because they've all been through health things, how long can they sit for, right? What can they eat? What can we talk about that's going to be of meaning? And for me, I think that we have all been through this past year of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. We all have something to talk about. If we've been fortunate enough to get our shots, there is a freedom there that we are now experiencing that we didn't before. What did that look like for everybody? How did that feel? And the vegan piece has been actually quite fun to think about. And Ingrid has taught me the phrase, accidentally vegan. What are things that we just do that are accidentally, oh, I didn't know. So our karpas, right? Our parsley, our greens, our summer, that's not a problem. And this is from my garden. That's very nice. One year, what I did is I gave everybody little plants already planted, done of parsley, and they cut their own parsley and then dipped it. It was fun, very fun. Because people forget, and I think, Ingrid, again, that's what you were talking about, the disconnect between what we have on our plate and where it came from. And I think this really roots us into where do things come from. Okay, so, and we have charoset, and there's so many different recipes out there. Use what you use in your family or create something new. What was interesting is oftentimes we put a little sugar in the charoset just because the wine may not sweeten it enough. Sugar could be a problem for some people in the way it's manufactured. So people might use honey, but honey really isn't vegan. So I've learned so much this year. And so I made this with agave syrup. It was just a little bit. It was fine. And Daniel already ate half of it. He didn't know it was for a program. So our other thing is, horseradish. I do get the real thing and peel it off and people can, taste that. I'm going to throw out some other things that we have for some alternatives. The beitzah, the egg, I think is problematic for vegans to have that on their Seder plate, particularly roasted. This is an avocado pit. And it works, it looks like it works really well. So there's that. There's also the, representing spring. I have edible flowers representing spring. Some people put seeds on there, in it. But it was fun to think about what could be, and I want you to see this. Let's see, but look at that Seder plate. I just thought it was like so colorful. Sorry if it's, there you go. Can you see it? Yeah. It was just colorful and different. And Pesach is a time when we say, why is this different? How is this different? Why do you have flowers instead of an egg? Why do you have, I used instead of a shank bone, I roasted a carrot. Looks pretty good. But it's still the fact of, I think it's that roasting aspect of it. It almost doesn't, yes, it's Paschal lamb and everything, but it's, we can tweak and we can really morph into what it means for us today. The other thing people will do for the shank bone is to use a roasted beet because of the blood that color that you would get from that. But I just think it's a beautiful vegetable. It's just an awesome color. I'm going to add some other things. The other thing we have is chazeret, which are it's that bitterness, and to use endive, or this is romaine, meaning, and the purpose of this is to think about what was our slavery like. We were enslaved for, so many, how many years we were enslaved. So we have the bitterness, we have this end, this harder end growing to the soft end. Or we can look at a little bitter to sweet. So you can interpret, that's what I love about, if we don't interpret it to something that makes sense to us, what's the holiday about, right? How do we transform it so it does make sense? So some other additions to the Seder plate. We are all familiar, I think, with the orange from Susanna Heschel. Nothing about the rabbi thing, but talks about representing the LGBT, the gay community. I don't want to get all the initials correctly. So that represents that. Somewhere I saw was putting an artichoke on the table. And it was to say how we are not always within the Jewish community respectful to interfaith families and interfaith couples. And I just thought it was an interesting way. I don't know if I would use an artichoke, but it's just the whole concept of it. There was the thing of just having olives on the Seder plate representing peace. And so, to think about, I also got, I don't think this is kosher LePesach. Does it have the hechsher? Does it have that stamp on it? No, but I'm a label reader anyway. And I think if anybody is going the vegan track or the of kashrut or anything else, we need to be pretty strong label readers. So there are things that I just don't eat during Pesach. And then there's things that I say, again, ethically, why am I buying that ketchup for Pesach? It's they may wash it out a little bit. I happen to be one who changes dishes and does a lot of different things. Again, but not everyone has to. This was almond butter and puffed quinoa, dark chocolate. And the importance of this is that it is fair trade. And you talk about slavery, right? How many people in the world are confined to working in unfair and unsafe conditions? So the whole concept of fair trade is really a very poignant Pesach theme. And the fact that it's quinoa. Rabbi Koppell, did you grow up having quinoa? Was that something?
Never heard of it.
All of us, right. First of all, we never heard of it. And number two, all of a sudden when quinoa was okay to use during Pesach, it's like, oh, what's your recipe? What are you doing? It was like this whole thing that all of a sudden things that were not acceptable years ago are on the okay list to have. But I thought this was a great combo of fair trade chocolate and quinoa. It was a whole thing of integrating, being aware of what happens in our world and adapting to it. So I just want to ask you, think about what would be different on your Seder plate this year. Yes.
So, Cantor, I just put up in the chat, I just finished reading the brand new CCAR Haggadah, hot off the presses, Mishkan HaSeder.
Yeah,
And if you look in the chat, I cut and pasted one little section from there that intrigued me with all kinds of contemporary additions.
nice.
Some of which you mentioned, and others include things like a banana for modern refugees, a tomato for farm workers, a pine cone for prison reform, an acorn
Right.
to acknowledge indigenous peoples. There's just a whole list of them.
And I think what's interesting about that is that just as the things on the Seder plate have been set for thousands and thousands of years, we think about it's set, but it's new. What can we incorporate into our Seder this year that will be new, that next year we may choose to incorporate again, or say, you know what, that's not working for me this year. What is going to work? And because things change in our lives, to look around your kitchen, to look around, if the next time you have the chance to leisurely shop a farmer's market or your grocery store, look around and say, this jackfruit, I don't know what to do with it, but it could be something, right? What could it represent? But something that's maybe a personal thing in your family.
Have you ever seen a jackfruit?
Yes, I have.
They're like bigger than a watermelon.
But to think about, it'd be interesting to think about what would be our own personal, our family object or food that would be new for us this year, as well as something that represents our community and our world. Because every family has changed this year. Every individual has changed this year. And to, I think, ignore that and to not remember the maror, that tough part that we all had to live through and cry through. So this year, when we eat this maror, to really know that those tears were the tears of our ancestors, our continued slavery, but what we all had to endure. And to know that we can go from the hard part to the soft part and to the sweetness of the charoset and so many things. So this is a holiday filled with questions. I hope that when you have the blessing of having maybe just one person, maybe you're having it by yourself this year, but to ask yourself, what is this all about? And what does this mean to me? So may your Pesach be a meaningful one, however it looks for you this year. And it may just be filled with lots of good health and love. So thank you, Nona. Yeah, Sandra.
Question, sort of on your topic. I was noticing I think it was the Ichai, that they talk about the Elijah cup and the Miriam cup.
Right.
Which I guess that's been around for a while, but this is the first time I focused on it. And so I did a little research looking into it, and it was talking about Miriam's well, and this represents women. And that was a whole nother revelation.
Mm-hmm. See, isn't that sweet? It's been around for actually a while now, which is great. But to think also that without Miriam in the story, where are we? And it does represent, all the women in our history and who we are, and freedom, that we could sing and dance when we crossed. So thank you for bringing that up. And I hope that you each have, Kos Miriam on your plate, on your Seder table as at Kos Eliyahu. And, and what I do personally is that I fill these cups, I fill the wine in cups that were from my own history. So it could be my great grandmother's glass. I'll start crying. But I always try to put something on the table that represents who I am and where I came from. And if it's something that you don't have in your history, who are you now that's special that you want to have on that table? So to think about that. And so thank you, Sandra, for adding that.
So I put up in the chat a document that I've been collecting for many, many years with just excerpts from my favorite Haggadot, different things to think about, different ways of thinking about the parts of the Seder. And I did incorporate this selection that I shared before from the new CCAR Haggadah, and there are a bunch of other selections from that are in that document. And to Sandra's point, there's also a ritual for Kos Miriam that's in that document as well. So maybe that'll be helpful.
Right. Also, Rabbi Koppell, how, if I wanted to print that, is that possible from the chat, or how does that work?
I think so, but it's like probably 80 pages.
Oh, then forget it.
So
I want to.
You can download it.
Just open it up and click save.
Okay.
And then you can just print the parts that you want.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. My
pleasure.
Thank you so much, Cantor Sharona. That was really beautiful and thought-provoking for me. I wanted to take this opportunity for everybody to share what they how they're preparing for this holiday. What are your issues? Are there recipes you're trying? Is your interest in being here to talk to people who've tried different recipes and figure out what the options are? Is your family on board with you as you try new recipes, or are you feeding people who want a very traditional meal and trying to figure out where your explorations, your personal explorations fit into that? Are you looking for resources, or do you have a plan and you want to share that? So I would say to prevent chaos, as always happens with these kind of things on Zoom, maybe if you know how to use that reactions button, if you want to raise your hand, if you can just raise your hand if you're interested, that's good. So I'll start with Alicia. I saw your hand. Where'd you go now? Did I lose you? No, there you are.
So the first thing I noticed right away when I came here is that there are 3 women in this group chat today that have all been on my journey to Judaism. It started with Rabbi Koppell when she was teaching in Mesa like 30 years ago. I took a course with her, and she's the first one who talked me into all the Jewish holidays and the whole cycle of the Jewish year. And because of that, I had my own Seder as a young 20-something here in Phoenix. And Ingrid was also a huge part of my life then too, because I would never have met Rabbi Koppell if it hadn't been for Ingrid living here. And my third teacher is Sharona Feller, who was my B'nai Mitzvah teacher too, and talked me into, she showed us her David Moss Haggadah, and I ended up buying one of the similes, like the same thing Sharona has. And my husband refuses to let me tell him how much I paid for it. He doesn't want Sharona's laughing. But anyway, so I've been really struggling. We've invited 2 other couples to come with us. We're all vaccinated. I'm going to have it outside on my patio. And none of them have any diet. I eat meat. I eat everything. I'm not, like one person's gluten-free. I'm gluten-free. So I'm like, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. So I've really been struggling with like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, you know what? Dang it. I didn't have Passover last year. We basically just canceled it in my family. We had just arrived back from Kenya. We were living out of our suitcases, and we just didn't do it. And we didn't go to anybody's house. And it's like, I feel like this is going to be my last regular Seder with all the traditional foods that I've eaten. And I've been making myself not feel guilty about that. So I'm making brisket and mashed potatoes with butter, and I'm having a regular Passover Seder. And I think I'm going to change up my Seder plate though. I was struggling with getting a lamb bone. I'm like, I can't buy a lamb bone. So I was making bone broth this morning, and I saved one of the chicken bones. I said, well, at least I'm recycling a chicken bone. I hate opening my freezer and seeing this little chicken bone. And I get unwrapped because I don't want to waste the saran wrap. I don't want to put plastic on it. So I think I'm going to fill my Seder plate with all this amazing stuff And I'm going to either piggyback on your ideas, or I'll do what you said and go to the farmer's market next Saturday morning and find inspiration. So that's what I got out of today. Thank
No,
you.
that's sweet. Alicia, I decided after creating these two that I'm going to have 2 Seder plates. I'm going to have a traditional one. I still can't do the shank bone. I'm not but a traditional one, and one that could represent all new things in our lives. So I appreciate all that you said. Thank you. And I'm going to add to that just for a second, is that, and I started out my thing saying we have a lot of elders who are going to be there, to switch foods that they grew up with, to me isn't fair to them. So I'm respecting that, but I'm not going to ignore what I want to do as well. So it's kind of a bridging right now. Who knows what it's going to look like next year? But I need to be sensitive to both sides. Again, respecting what Pesach is all about.
I would say that what's interesting about that, when my mother-in-law was still alive, we did not attempt to change the menu, because that felt, every year it's like, this might be her last Passover. This might be her last Passover. But I would say for many of you, you have children in your world, young adults, or, your children or your grandchildren, and many of them are questioning the traditions and I think there's a relevance to having options, or saying we're going to try it this year to do it differently, or at least we're going to have plenty of side dishes that are vegan, plant-based friendly for people. And as you choose meat, I would, or dairy or whatever products, I know I'm finding myself really looking for genuinely, humanely certified animal products. If I'm going to use them, I'm going to use them from, like, there's eggs, not just cage-free, because that doesn't really mean very much, but there are certified humane eggs, and they cost more. But but eggs are still really cheap in the grand scheme of things. Even expensive eggs are still really cheap in the grand scheme of things. If you are still going to use dairy, there is grass-fed dairy products now, much more available. If you are looking at meats, there are smaller butchers that buy locally, and some of those are actually grass-fed, grass-raised animals. It's not, that to find them kosher and grass-fed, I'm not quite sure. I haven't explored the kosher butchers here to see if they are starting to offer humanely raised animals. Certainly humanely killed animals, but are they humanely raised animals? And that's the other side of the question. It is and also the fair labor practices, because a lot of chocolate is one of the big things that is often, chocolate and coffee are it's easy to find fair trade labeling on them, so you kind of know what you're getting. Sometimes a lot of other industries not so clear to know how to know if it's fair. But the farmers market, someone had asked where the best farmers markets are. I know I often go to the one on Central and Bethany, because I like that one a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say that one. I think that one's the best one, but there is one at the Roadrunner Park where we do Tashlich as a congregation that's nice also.
Mhm.
And there's also one like in Central Phoenix, Heritage Square, that's not got as much stuff, but it's fun. And there are also vendors with other things, like you can find vegan soap and things like that if you want.
Yeah.
Scottsdale, downtown Scottsdale, if it's still running, used to have an incredible one. Maya's Farm, all the local farmers would come, and also regional from like Tucson, lots of produce, lots of hand, locally sourced. And that was in like over on like 2nd Street in Brown, over by the Center for the Arts, kind of, and the hospital, the Osborne Hospital.
I see there's one at City North now too. I don't know if anybody's gone there, but I saw a sign for it, which might be closer to some people if you're up by Desert Ridge or, Hope.
I've been to the one downtown Scottsdale, the farmer's market, and it's not as good as Central and 7th
Right.
Street.
Okay.
I'll
But
be
it's-
honest with
Yeah,
you.
oh
They have,
yeah, that's the best.
yeah. They have more stuff at Central and Camelback. I've been there many times, and I was just wondering if there were any more that had a lot of stuff. I mean, it's pretty small still, but it's nice.
I don't know of other new ones. I'm trying to remember the name of the place because there's a lot of things I'm not sure if they've survived the pandemic. But Sing Farms had opened something new that was a restaurant as well before the
Yeah.
pandemic that was kind of lovely. And I don't know if that is
I'm not
still-
sure it's open
Yeah, I'm not sure it's
yet
operational either.
to the public.
For meats, Arcadia Meats, which is down on Indian School in 40th Street or something like that, 20, I don't know, something in there, 32nd Street. That has meats that are locally sourced generally and with social justice in mind or with animal rights in mind. And so they're just another source.
Is that the shop that's in like that center with a restaurant and
Yeah.
a coffee place? Okay.
Yeah, I think Lola's Coffee is next to it, and I can't remember all this. It's a real cute little shop area. I just went and got something there, and I was happy to see they survived because a lot of those places it's hard.
Around the corner from me.
Oh well.
You know what's really striking to me is how, and again, going back to what Rabbi Koppell said in the beginning about, we just need a piece of matzah and some bitter herbs. I mean, we don't need the elaborate, my meals are not as elaborate as when I grew up. We just don't eat that way anymore. So we don't need to have 17 courses of things. That being said, to think about not just what happens at the Seder table, but what happens to the rest of the week. How am I going to make this week different than all the other weeks? I'm going to, and perhaps this is another way to start and go a little deeper into your own kavanah of eating, right? Into your own way of saying, maybe I'm going to stop eating or start eating, right? It's not an either or, it's just, adapting and changing, but to have that mindset of Pesach and being, because all of us right now are thinking very deliberately about how we're going to share our meals with others and how we're going to continue for ourselves.
And I would say that one of the big things that makes a lot of difference environmentally is food waste. And certainly there are lots of these holidays where we cook for lots of people, less so this year probably, where there's so much more food than we need, so much more than we can consume that ends up becoming garbage. And I think in the United States, about 40% of the food that is produced, which is very resource intense, gets thrown away. And we have such a tendency to also eat so much more than we need. So if you're trying to eat for health, even if you're indulging yourself in this time, you can also think that thin matzah might be inspiration for not eating 3 or 4 times as many calories as you need at that one meal. If anybody, I know we've talked about this book other times, but this is kind of a fun book, this the Jewish Food Hero Cookbook. It goes through all the holidays. It's a plant-based diet book by, the woman's name is Kendon Alfond, and this book is in our archives. We've listed this with other books. She's got this other amazing, really fun book, and we haven't figured out how to use it this year. I don't know if we will. Maybe we'll use it next year for some ongoing programming. Same author, but it's taking each woman of the Bible and developing recipes that go with that woman's story that are plant-based recipes. It's just such a fascinating way you could do really interesting programming that we keep looking at and haven't done yet. But there are so many resources for recipes. I don't know if people want to share or need to talk about that. I know I have used for the first time, I actually used aquafaba as a meringue, like whipped. Aquafaba is the juice on the top of the garbanzo beans and or the chickpeas in the cans. And if you drain that off, it acts like egg whites. You can whip it and it'll act like meringue. And it often is used as an egg substitute. And some recipes do well with, different egg substitutes. You can't just generically stick the same egg substitute in all the recipes because sometimes the chemistry just isn't right. But that works for meringue type things, and really delicious with some coconut that gives it something to brown and get crunchy and toasty. And maybe some coconut oil isn't the healthiest, but it does make things get brown and crispy. So there's so many various recipes for meringues and macaroons that I've come across. So those are some things that I found fun. The matzo balls are still eluding me. I tried more kinds. I tried 2 other recipes, and one was a mashed potato based. I've seen a lot of references to. And I think that the main thing with all of those matzo ball substitutes is that you can't boil them very long in the broth because the boiling, they come undone. So you either steam them or bake them, and then you put them in this bowl and you pour the soup over them. So you don't boil them in the soup because otherwise you have really thick, creamy soup and no matzo balls. So anyway, we always make a lentil based faux liver because I don't like, I don't let liver come in my house. I hate it all my life. So that's something we've done forever. And that I love that. I know there's lots of chopped liver. I have seen recipes for gefilte fish substitutes, and I'm curious if anybody's tried that.
I saw one, but it looked so weird. I didn't even want to touch it. I saw one online out of your resource. It just looked bizarre.
The things that I've seen, they use eggplant and potatoes often to make a puree of some sort that you shape into a shape, and maybe coat it in like I don't know.
Sharona's face.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. It's a complicated thing. So I don't know.
And I think it's really important because we all come from different traditions, and some may come from more Sephardic, where you eat different things than from an Ashkenazic background. So make what feels right to you in terms of what your tradition is, or if you want to, start changing some things. But I think that's, that's important just to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
That, Ashkefardic, whatever we try to do.
But as you're making, I would say I want to give a shout out for the non.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. All right, looks like I'm going to take over. Is there Nona is frozen. Is there any?
Oh,
Lisa?
there you are, Nona.
I'm sorry, did I freeze in there?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You did.
My internet connection is unstable, it's telling me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just going to say, broth is something that's pretty easy to swap out and not lose flavor. So I would encourage you to try the no chicken broth or those kind of products. They are great, relatively speaking, in the world of changing out recipes.
So I too have not been successful and tried a number of different matzo ball recipes. So that's been evading me as well. But you can find tons of vegan chicken soup recipes online, and you use the broth as Nona was saying, and then the carrots and the celery, and it really tastes like chicken soup. I mean, you can't tell it's not chicken soup. So I don't know about the matzo balls, but I at least have been able to master the chicken soup part of it.
Yeah.
Lisa, do you want to?
Oh, I was just going to say, I went to that Zoom of the Veg Fund for Pesach last Sunday. Marcy, were you there? I think you were. And I was really kind of impressed. The gal who did the matzo balls, she baked them. And she said they're not as fluffy as, they typically are, but they're not as hard. Some people like them super hard and some like them really fluffy. They were somewhere in between, but she baked them. And she's like a professional chef. So that's one tip. The other thing that I found from them, what I think I'm going to try, because I'm all about trying to do things in advance and easy. And thanks to this program, I don't think I could do the meat thing or the chicken thing. I just can't do it. But they did an entree recipe for, believe it or not, lasagna, and they used matzah, and they layered it, and they created this woman from Israel created a cheese sauce that looked amazing with potatoes and cashews, and whipped it. And you just use your regular red sauce, whether it's out of a jar or you want to make it from scratch, and you could add any kind of veggies you want in there. But I think I'm going to try that this year. So I think those recipes might be up on Veg Fund. And they had a great simmus recipe, which I'm not sure goes with lasagna, but I wanted to do that. But it was great. There was a good simmus.
In my family, everything goes with lasagna.
I don't know. I think I have to do a salad. I don't know.
And Lisa, the thing is that Passover is 8 days. It's not just the Seder, right? So you can have this on another day.
My main concern is how am I going to get through Passover without the eggs, for like the matzah bread, but I'll have to experiment. So we'll see. Or maybe I'll get the certified, if I really get desperate, I'll get the certified humane eggs or something.
Those Vital Farms is the one that Whole Foods sells that is certified humane.
Last year I just Googled vegan matzah, fried matzah recipes, and I made it and it tasted fine.
I did too. I made it. It was easy. It wasn't that hard.
And what did you use instead of the egg, may I ask?
I didn't even use any egg at all. I can't remember. I wrote it down. I have to pull it out.
I don't remember either because it was last year, but I'll just Google it again and I'll do it again this year.
Why not use just?
Yeah, I was just about to say the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Did anybody try using just in the matzo balls?
Yes.
Yes.
It does not work
together. No.
And there's also the powdery egg substitute too. I've only used those two. Well, actually, and then there's the fava bean that, what do you call that?
Aquafaba.
Yeah.
And
I haven't tried it, but I hear that.
Sauce, banana. There's lots of things you can substitute instead of eggs, right?
I'm really enjoying the flaxseed powder, and I sometimes it says to let it rest in the water for 5 minutes. Sometimes I just add it in without doing the resting, so it absorbs the extra liquid in what I'm mixing. And I wonder if you could do that with the matzo ball, use a lot less water to help it bind.
Maybe.
I don't know if it would work.
I don't know. You had give yourself time and product to practice with. Because,
would quinoa be pasadica because it puffs up? It is.
Yeah,
it is. It got the okay. Probably, I don't know, 10 years ago or something.
In 2016, I think, but maybe it was before that. The Reform and Conservative movement decided that quinoa, is that how you say it? It was okay.
Quinoa, yeah.
Quinoa. Yeah, so we were allowed to eat beans and rice and nuts, which were forbidden in the past. And so the actual overseeing organizations changed the rules.
Okay, wait a minute. Beans are now okay if you're Ashkenazi? I didn't know that. Okay.
I didn't realize that. And rice.
But what's interesting about that, Sandra, is that it's okay, but those are like hard chains for me to break.
Yeah.
I'm so, in that. So, but it opens things up.
Well, I was very curious too, because a lot of when you're trying to do gluten-free also, a lot of the gluten-free products they're not wheat, but they are starches from a lot of things. And so I was very curious how that, if it's not supposed to appear like flour or be mistaken for flour, those things feel like dicey to me. So, but
Rabbi Koppell, could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, that's where I would go back to the whole concept of simplicity. The idea is not necessarily to substitute so that we have a week of foods that look like what we eat the other 51 weeks of the year, but they're in a Passover form. The idea is really to just eat, get back to a much more, fruits and vegetables are, you don't need a hechsher.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Any other thoughts? We're past our 1 hour Zoom.
I just
today.
have a quick comment. It's not about any of the food, although I find this very interesting and almost want to take it more to an intellectual level than about the actual food that we're serving.
Right.
But I'd just like to say, and I think at Sharona, it might have been you that said serving to our elders. And I laugh every time now because I feel like I'm kind of I'm almost the one in this group. And so we need a new name for,
Yeah. Right there.
and
We're all
hello to everybody on here I haven't seen in a while.
Well, I have a thought about this year also, which is not necessarily related to food, but it may be. And that is that I'm not in charge this year. And so for a control freak not to be in charge, and I am a guest in my daughter's home, and she is a control freak. So I will have to just sort of, be open to whatever. And if she should ask me for my input, which might or might not happen, I'll offer it. But if it doesn't happen, I'm got to go with the flow. So that's a different kind of thing for this year.
I see Marcy has her hand up, but I just have to share a joke that the Cantor told me the other day. Janet, knock, knock.
Who's there?
Who's there?
Control freak. Now you say control freak who?
It's good.
And I think Marcy wanted on a more serious note.
Marcy, you're
Can't hear you,
muted.
Marcy.
You're muted. Yeah.
Sorry, my headphone reads too. I forgot I did it. On a more serious note, now I found the booklet that they sent us from last week's thing, and I stuck it in the chat for anybody who wants it. It's got that matzo ball soup recipe, that lasagna recipe in it, a couple other ones, and just some general things. So it's in the chat for anybody who wants it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. That's the Shamayim website has a Passover guide, and
That's it. That's
right.
what I stuck. That's what I stuck up there.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of fun ideas to practice. Yeah, a lot of options, and a kind of philosophical introduction written by their intern I saw. So it's fun to see young people, rewording everything again. Yeah, that's great. Any other thoughts before we?
No, do you want to talk about April 16th?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rabbi Koppell. Yes, our next event, and it might be our last one of the season. I'm not totally sure. We're trying to look at something for May, but next for Yom Ha'atzmaut on April 21st, April 16th. Thank you, April 16th. It is the Shabbat. It's Shabbat. It's for Friday night. We are going to offer a grab and go Shabbat meal, Israeli style Shabbat meal from it's Kitchen 18.
Yes.
Yes. And that'll be available to stop by and pick up at the temple if you let us know you want to participate. And then the services will happen. And then after services, we're going to have a discussion of environmental issues or progress that's being made in Israel. Just keep it Israel focused, but talk about, because they've done a lot of pretty amazing environmental things, meeting their own environmental challenges, and they have a big vegan vegan population, big vegan energy in Israel. So we'll use Israel as a guide and look at it from a sort of non-political, food-based, environmentally based way to look at what kind of role models they are for us. So that will be that programming. There'll be a lot more information about it. But so Shabbat on April 16th, and that may be Rabbi Koppell. You're not able to join us for that one, right? Is that
That
right?
is correct. And I see Hope wants to say something. Yeah.
Just something real quick. Those recipes, Marcy, is it possible to email that to people? The recipes that you like, chicken soup and all that stuff?
Hope
You
those-
know, I can put them on the website. We have this archive going for the vegan challenge that has everything, and I can put them up there and everybody can just download them.
Yes,
Does that work, Hope, or do you want me to email it to you?
that would be perfect.
Right.
Okay.
I'll send Nona the recording of this conversation, and then maybe she can send folks a reminder of what that link is.
Okay.
I think that Sheena was trying to include it on every flyer, and I'm not sure. I haven't looked for it for a while, so I'm not sure, but we'll make sure that it's available. Okay.
Also, one more reminder from your sponsor.
Yes.
April 10th is the Temple Gala.
Oh,
And
yes.
we would love to have everyone's support and participation. Please buy your tickets. Please join us. Please bid on the wonderful auction items. It's obviously a very challenging year, and yet we rely on the gala as to fund part of the temple budget. So we would really appreciate your support.
And if you have signed up for the Passover meals that to order through the temple, we are providing some vegan cookie options to that effort. So if you're coming to pick up one of those meals, hopefully there'll be some vegan options for cookies to go with those.
Like the
Nona,
vegan
thank you
hamantash, and they
so
were cool
much.
too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say to Rabbi Koppell, thank you, to Ingrid, thank you, to Nona, thank you for organizing
Thank you,
all of
Nona.
this, and to all of you for showing up and being with us this afternoon. It just kind of makes you feel like if you're doing some of this that's new to you, that you have a community with you and
Right.
community support.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And wishing you all a very
Yes.
sweet, happy Pesach.
Happy Pesach to everybody.
All right.
Happy Passover. Happy Pesach.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.